Hey everybody, John Sneisen, a World Alternative Media here, and we are joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen, and debt is going insane in the United States. We've talked a lot about what this debt comes from, but we're going to go further into it today. As Zero Hedge reports, CBO warns of fiscal catastrophe as a result of exponential debt growth in the U.S. So John, can you go into what on earth is going on here?
Well, there's debt slushing around in every crease and crevice around the world today, and of course the United States is one of the main head people in the front of it because of the Federal Reserve System, that spread around the world like a vicious
cyclone.
It's been insane. Like this whole credit system is expanding so rapidly. The thing was, though, in 2008, the United States deleveraged quite a bit because of the housing market. People, went bankrupt. They defaulted on their loans and so on. But they're back at it full force again, of course, and worse than ever. I'm just baffled by these numbers. So we're going to go through a couple of the main numbers.
But before we go into the numbers, John, let's just explain how the Federal Reserve creates so much debt. So they print currency out of thin air, fiat currency out of thin air. It devalues the dollar. It creates debt and inflation. And a lot of this debt, people don't seem to understand where debt comes from. People talk about debt a lot within, like, oh, well, we are in debt. Who are we in debt to? Well, let's explain who we're in debt to or what we're in debt to.
Well, so first of all, almost all money today is debt. That is number one. Number one rule: money equals debt. There's only the cash and coin that you have that is not debt, but everything else is debt basically. There's somebody owing that debt to someone. If you have a dollar in your bank account, that dollar is usually owned to somebody else. It's a liability to somebody else. And who are we owing this to? Of course not, the Federal Reserve prints money through having the U.S. government issue debt. That's how they print money. Then it ends up in the banking system and it increases tenfold, plus a lot more in some cases. Here in Canada, we have a zero reserve policy, so we don't even have the old fractional reserve banking system, which is, a 9-to-1 ratio of how much money you can create out of the initial. But the rule is usually 100 can create 1,000. So when you put out, let's say, $1 million, you could add 2 zeros to it. And that's how much debt, like the first amount of debt that comes out is not that much. It's, of course, the Fed and the United States government that gets into debt, but then it spreads like wildfire as it hits the fractional reserve banking system and the private banks that issue the debt from the deposited money into their account.
And then it becomes Hegelian kind of problem, reaction, solution, repeat. Everything that they do against the debt creates more debt. It just constantly turns into a cycle, and it really enslaves individuals into debt. It puts them into servitude to the state eventually and the banking system because they are pushed down this bottomless pit of debt. But John, go into these numbers. These are insane. It's always growing. It always gets crazier. People were saying it was crazy 40 years ago, but it just never ends.
Well, in the article it states that the United States are projecting in 30 years from now 150 debt to GDP ratio with the current deficit. And of course the deficit is increasing by a day. It's actually not going down if people believe that. They actually pay down about 100 billion worth of dollars. But they're currently going up as we speak. And the current number for the U.S. national government debt is $19.85 trillion.
Read it before it changes.
Yeah, oh, well, it's changed already, so it's going up as we speak. Now, that's $61,146 per citizen in the United States are owing that through their government's reckless spending.
And before we go on to the next, how does that affect individuals living in the United States, whether rich or poor?
Well, they have to pay it down. If you're going to pay that debt down, it has to come somewhere, and that is taxation. So with the current tax cuts, like what they want to do is they want to cut taxes in order to rapidly inflate. They hope to inflate the economy. The thing is, they don't have any fuel to inflate on right now in the United States. They're in a demographic cliff. The baby boomers are retiring, so they're in a deflationary state while they want inflation. They want a big inflation in the economy. The economy is kind of like going like slowing down. Like in Japan is a great example where the United States is going. Because they had, the aging population, and now, their population has been declining for almost 20 years, and they have a massive inflation in Japan.
Yeah.
Of course, the yen, they've been printing, there's so much Japanese debt. They have a 256% debt to GDP for the government's debt, and it's insane. Like, they're just printing money to buy stocks now. Everything is so artificial in Japan. So that's where the United States are heading.
Well, I know your first language is Norwegian, John, but I find, you mentioned taxation. I find that to be a weird way to pronounce theft. I've never seen that before. I thought I just call it theft.
Yeah, that's true. In Norwegian, we just call it theft. It's two of the same.
Yeah.
Like, taxation is theft. That's basically what it is.
It is literally theft.
Yeah.
You can't get out of it. You
can't get out of it. If you're stuck in a nation state and they have a government that wants you to pay tax, well, they are gonna steal it from you one way or another. Unless you're able to completely run a black market economy, which I know some people have been able to. They're completely run in cash and so on. And they're smart people, they know how to get around these extortionist techniques that the government is using.
The private voluntary contract is so much better than the social contract, which none of us consent to. But go on here, John. We got a lot of crazy stuff here.
So we'll go to the private debt, because there's not only, of course, that the government is in such massive debt in the United States that they're never going to be able to pay back, by the way. The only way they're going to be able to pay that back is through a debt jubilee and say that they're bankrupt. That's the only way the United States are getting out of it. And don't believe that any other country is any better than the United States. Most countries are as terrible as the United States, or even worse.
It's just that the US dollar happens to be the world reserve currency.
Yeah, exactly. So they've been able to print so much money and then send it out of the country, just have people buying it everywhere. All this debt, all these bonds, they shipped it out. They basically printed and shipped it out. If it's kept all that money in the United States, we would have a hyperinflation in the United States. But now you're seeing the money's coming back. So the thing is, when money's coming back again, when they sell off this debt and it ends up in the United States, well, that inflation is coming back now. We've seen inflationary numbers. Even the manipulated numbers are going up. They're 2.7 right now in the United States. So things are inflating, and of course people are poorer and poorer, and they're getting into more debt. The middle class is getting destroyed. The middle class races and falls with debt. That's basically how it gets created and how it gets eliminated. When they print money, of course, with the wages that they have to pay the most amount of taxes, the middle class. So they're getting eviscerated, and they're getting into more and more debt. We see this in, of course, Norway, and other socialist countries like Canada. They're top 10 in the world for private debt, because people don't have enough, because they're getting taxed to death by the extortion of the government. Now, the current number for personal debt in the United States is also pretty stunning, because it's $18.22 trillion, which is an insane number. It's just mind-boggling as well. And then credit card debt is $987 billion, $14 billion in mortgage debt, $1.42 trillion in student loan debt. Now, student loan debt in the United States, you can't even get rid of when you die. Which was a terrible deal that the banksters, of course, made so they could extort.
I wanna just quickly point out what you're seeing on the screen. The screenshots the numbers might be slightly different from what John is reading, because these numbers change so fast, and that is just a tribute to how insane this debt accumulation is.
Oh, it's like such a rapid race, and what is happening is we have talked about before, the exponential rise. As you get that hockey stick moment, that the climate change idiots are using to try to say that we're gonna all die and drown in water. It's the same type of thing, but this is a real hockey stick. This is not the fake made up one that they created themselves. Now, the total U.S. debt is the total U.S. debt that exists. It's $68.48 trillion. That's the total amount of debt that they have. And this is mind-boggling numbers, Josh. Just get prepared to get blown away, because in debt per citizen, that's $210,000 in debt per citizen. Now, if you calculate all the families, because of course all the little, like your kids and everybody, they're not going to have debt yet. But the total debt per family in the United States, with all the debt, we're talking about the government debt, the private debt, and every other debt that they can have, $826,000 per family. And the total interest paid per citizen every year is $7,659. That's money made by the banksters.
And that's just going to balloon as time goes on.
That's the banksters making money right there. And then, of course, they are struggling with another thing that they promised to pay all the Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, all these social programs that they created. They are unfunded currently. Like, they don't have a way to really pay them, so they have to go into this deficit to be able to pay that out to the people to keep the system from collapsing. What I see, though, coming is it will collapse in on itself, unfortunately. There's not going to be any pension left for those people that thought that the government was going to give them a pension at the end of the line. Especially our generation are don't ever expect to have a pension, so you better prepare yourself.
Insure yourself. Yeah, insure yourself. And John, I have to ask, just starting to close this off, how much longer can this sustain itself? Because I know fundamentals are off the table. You can't make a trend that says on this day, on this year, this is going to happen. Because, like I said, there's so much manipulation that you can't put a date on it. But it's going to happen. So how long do you think, from as far as you could see, this can possibly sustain itself?
Well, I think we're getting to a point now where there's no way out for the Federal Reserve. Like, they've been buying a whole bunch of debt. They had their quantitative easing and so on going on. Mm-hmm. Now they stopped, of course, but they're going to come back to it. Just wait and see as interest rates goes up. They're going to get more and more desperate because the economy will slow down again. And what you're going to see is they're just going to blatantly start buying everything. I think you're going to end up seeing the Federal Reserve owning everything if you let them to do it. If we don't manage to abolish them before they manage to get this ownership, they would basically buy everything that they can in order to save the system, because there's nothing left to save. Everybody is exiting out of the system right now when you look at mutual funds, all kind of investments, because in the United States and in Canada here, people have to start withdrawing their money, and the baby boomers has to start withdrawing that money out of their plans. So they're gonna, plummet the whole system because they need to sell off the debt and the stocks that they hold. Now, this is gonna end up in a complete collapse.
Absolutely. Well, we've seen the collapse coming for a long time. It should have happened a long time ago, but it needs to happen anyway to build up from zero to through the free market system and free monetary system outside of this centrally planned system. And it's so important to people need to get themselves out of debt slavery, because once you're down that bottomless pit, you have nothing to do but to beg the government to give you a ladder to climb back up. And that's how they gain control over the entire populace. So just leaving this off, John, this is insane. We'll continue to report on this because it just never ends. But hopefully this system will go down soon so we can start from scratch as free individuals, free voluntary individuals. But until next time, check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated. You don't need to send a donation. You could also put that money into something to save yourself. But if you have some extra money kicking around, we really appreciate it. We do this all for free. And we will also put the address for Bitcoin in the description and the comments, as well as on the screen for you to scan if you so please. So thanks again, John. We'll be back at you with much more. This is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.